Hey guys, welcome back to another Genshin Impact video. Today we're going to be doing another top 10, but this time around it's going to be on the best characters specifically for free-to-plays. A number of the game's best units are only so under the assumption that you have the surrounding infrastructure to actually make them good, or if you have a certain constellation or weapon or something to that effect. While free-to-plays do have the opportunity to pull for additional copies of a 4 or 5 star character if they play the game long enough, I think there's still a notable difference between a dolphin or long-time player and someone who's just starting out or has only been playing for a short while. Most free-to-plays can only accumulate enough pulls over the course of a year to pick and choose maybe half a dozen 5-star characters at most. That being said, a number of choices on this list will be the same regardless of if you're a free-to-play or a pay-to-win player. My goal is to focus on what units cover the widest number of scenarios and have the most party diversity, not necessarily who has the highest DPS ceiling or the most broken fringe comp in the game. For the sake of balance, I opted to make the list half 5-star and half 4-star, as it would make no sense for the video to consist of 10 5-stars as that would contradict the list being intended for free-to-play players. Let's get on with it, and like with all my top 10s, this one will not be ordered. First and foremost, I'm really hoping this video gets out to you before her banner runs out, but one of the best characters in the game right now is actually our newest addition in Genshin Impact, Xilonen. Xilonen's the baddest bitch in the game, even though I'm not really into cat girls, but that's besides the point. If you're looking for someone who can buff all manner of teams and strategies, you really can't find someone better than her. She offers a plethora of supportive utility, beginning with her skill, which has the potential to shred the elemental resistance of all nearby enemies according to who is on your party. With a buff duration more than double the cooldown, this can essentially be taken for granted, as it will be active at all times. Having the ability to simultaneously shred up to 3 elements at C0 gives her insane coverage, with her only real shortcoming being that her usefulness in Dendro is practically non-existent. Though it's not exclusive to just her, as a Natlan native she can also acquire the full strength of the new Cinder City artifact set, complementing her elemental shred with an equally strong elemental damage boost for the entire party, making her pretty much a shoo-in for virtually any Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, or Electro-based team. To top it all off, using her in a multi-element team will cause her elemental burst to continuously heal the active character, supplementing her team's survivability in the process. Xilonen's keystone virtue is that of role consolidation, coalescing multiple jobs into one character to free up the rest of your party to be whatever the hell you want it to be. Definitely a contender for the top 3 best supports in the game at the moment. The next character is going to be Kazuha, a longtime favorite in the metagame having been around since version 1. Kazuha's market appeal largely stems from the same department as Xilonen. The extent of his elemental coverage allows you to splash him into just about any team you want. Like Xilonen, Kazuha can augment both your party's elemental damage and decrease the elemental resistance of nearby enemies. The Virtus Inventor or artifact set has essentially the same function as Xilonen's skill, wherein by triggering a swirl, whatever element was picked up by said reaction will then be shredded from all enemies caught within. Meanwhile, Kazuha's A4 passive then gives bonus elemental damage to the entire party corresponding to the absorbed element. So for instance, if he swirls Electro, he gives the entire party bonus Electro damage and shreds the Electro resistance of all nearby enemies. The main distinction between him and Xilonen is that Kazuha can deal a non-negligible amount of damage on his own courtesy of being an elemental mastery scaler, so he can contribute meaningful DPS to his party. Additionally, he also possesses a modicum of crowd control, corralling enemies into a tight spot to make it easier for the rest of your party to land their combo. You can debate whether it's superfluous or not for free-to-play to have both Kazuha and Xilonen, but for my money I think it is, on account of having to build up no less than 2 parties to clear Spiral Abyss. Unfortunately, Kazuha's rerun just came and went this past version 5.0, so he might not show up again until maybe the latter half of 2025. I was initially hesitant to include any DPS characters since I'm a firm believer that supports are infinitely more important for an account given their splashability, but inevitably there will be players asking who is the best DPS to have in terms of bang for buck, and it's Neuvillette. Come on, who the hell else would it be? While other DPS units have the potential to reach a higher ceiling with the right investment and team composition, Neuvillette's shining virtue is that he has without question the highest floor out of any character in the game. In fact, it's so high that his floor is even greater than the ceiling of other characters. The most consistent attacker in the game, excelling at every aspect of combat you can think of. Single target, AoE, mob clearing, boss fights, sustained DPS, overworld, domain, Spiral Abyss, this guy legitimately does not fall short in any aspect of combat. He also happens to be one of the easiest and most mobile-friendly attackers in the game too. The only requirements to get Neuvillette to full power are 3 unique Hydro reactions, any combination of Vaporize, Frozen, Electrocharge, Bloom Swirl, or Crystallize. You technically don't have to go 3 reactions though. Even before the advent of Arena, people went double Hydro and just made do with the 1.25 times and took advantage of Hydro Resonance instead. But regardless of which option you go for, the only other thing you need to ensure consistency with them is a Shielder, which admittedly might limit you to only a few units, but you were already going to throw in a bunch of random units to meet that A1 passive criteria, so it's not out of the way. That's what makes him so strong. He doesn't really care about who is on his team, just that they're able to provide 3 different elements and give him a shield. C1 makes him even more stupidly independent, but we're only looking at C0 for 5 stars cause this is for free-to-plays. Moving on though, our next character is going to be Zhongli. By this point, Zhongli's top tier status has been called into question as a result of the game getting more specialized supports who can do a bit more. But if we're going by who is a good staple to have in like a brand new account, this guy would still be a no-brainer. Unlike most units who have a flashy gimmick, Zhongli is characterized by having a simple one: defense, ultimate defense. Despite 4 years passing, Zhongli is still easily the best shielder in the game if we go by raw numbers. His Jade Shield is strong enough to withstand virtually all manner of attacks and does permanent uptime to boot, while secondarily reducing the physical and elemental rest of all nearby enemies. It still isn't a loss in DPS compared to an actual offensive support like for example Xilonen, but if you're the type of person who likes to play Minecraft on peaceful mode, then you're definitely gonna want Zhongli. In essence, Zhongli is one of the best free-to-play characters purely for the sake of convenience. He can theoretically be pushed into any party that doesn't strictly require all 4 party slots to be filled with a certain role. He's extremely convenient in the overworld where you don't have to constantly worry about healing, and in Spiral Abyss you can pretty much ignore 90% of all damage in the game and just do your thing. A near everlasting shield paired with the occasional stun from his elemental burst, and you have someone who you'll find yourself using a lot for no better reason other than you can't be bothered to dodge attacks. The final 5-star character I want to include is Nahida, decisively the best Dendro character in the game and a contender for top 5 best characters in Genshin Impact, period. While Dendro might appear to be more party slot demanding, thus not being too free to play friendly, it's still fairly accessible in the sense that most Dendro teams don't really care about who you bring. Nahida is the main reason for that. She's a one-stop shop for all your Dendro needs, whether you're opting for a quicken or bloom strategy, thanks to her extensive coverage and uptime on her elemental skill, along with having great personal damage and even some party-wide supportive utility. The only thing you need to really worry about is who to cover for your Electro and or Hydro department, or I guess Pyro if you're going Virgin or Burning. Similarly to Neuvillette, the requirements for playing her are practically brain dead. Simply hold her skill, do 360 no scope or 720 for good measure, and then switch to your other characters and let her skill mark do its thing. Her Dendro application is consistent and high in quantity, and being a Catalyst user, she does have the option to be played on field if you want even more application. At the same time, her Elemental Mastery buff is a substantial boost in DPS if you want to play her off-field, and her short cooldowns allow you to adjust yourself especially in wave battles whenever new enemies come in. Finally, as an added perk, she can remotely pick up items with the skill in the overworld, which is a huge convenience for any new player who has to collect a bunch of stuff in the beginning. If you have Nahida, you pretty much don't need any other Dendro character outside of very specific teams. Alright, now moving on to 4 stars. Unsurprisingly, most of them will consist of the power 5. There is a reason why they're given that moniker. They're extremely efficient for how accessible they are, and Xingqiu is still arguably the best of them all. I'm personally biased towards Xiangling, but casting my opinion aside, Xingqiu edges out for being a 4-star character with a similar purpose. If you're in need of any amount of Hydro for a Hydro reaction, whether Taser, Freeze, Bloom, Vaporize, whatever, Xingqiu would be the most brainless option for that. He affords you a healthy mixture of damage, application, and durability, courtesy of his Rain Cutter sending follow-up Hydro damage alongside the active character's normal attacks. Said Rain Cutter brute forcing its way through internal cooldown by being a multi-hitter, and the buff itself providing damage mitigation, a token bit of regen, and also stagger resistance. Not super armor compared to shields mind you, but typically enough to safeguard you from most attacks in the game. Other Hydro supports can outperform him in other fields, such as Xiangling for all-field DPS, Furina for damage boosting, and Kokomi for healing, but Xingqiu's defining characteristic is that he's an all-purpose character with an equal balance of damage, defense, and application, and a fair bit amount of all of them. There are many opportunities to get him as well, either via flagship events, the Star Glitter Shop, or getting copies of him while you're pulling for a 5-star. So while he's at his best at C6, you're practically guaranteed to obtain 7 Xingqius by just playing the game long enough. Next character is going to be Bennett. Like Xingqiu, Bennett has a perfect balance of offense and defense. Curiously though, what makes him so valuable has very little to do with the archetypal functions of his element of choice, rather just a very singular ability. Don't get me wrong, being a Pyro character is conducive to a lot of things, namely access to Pyro Resonance, and on occasion that he can potentially do a good chunk of damage with the initial cast of Fantastic Voyage. But what makes him so good is of course the buff. Bennett can artificially spike your active unit's attack by an extraordinary amount, over 1,000 with the right weapon. In addition, he can regenerate the active character's HP extremely quickly. Enhancing Bennett's value for free-to-plays is that the only things you need to max him out are to get him to level 90 and the base attack on his weapon. That's it. You need literally nothing else besides maybe energy regen, but you know, that's implied. He also has the lowest constellation requirement of any 5-star character, obtaining full functionality at C1, although for min-maxing sake, the real fun's at C5 for a level 13 burst. Regardless, he's the easiest character to build in the game bar none, and is currently best in slot in upwards of half a dozen teams, which I plan to elaborate more on while I talk about, of course, his best friend. Anywhere you see Bennett, you typically see Xiangling and vice versa. Copy pasta memes aside, Xiangling is the best pyro sub-DPS in the game, having one of the most powerful attacking elemental bursts that's been designed in a way so as to essentially make her the Xingqiu of pyro, working for anything and everything related to pyro. Having lampshaded earlier, Bennett and Xiangling are currently best in slot in upwards of half a dozen teams. Ride International, Child International, Navia, Mono Pyro, Reverse Melt, just to name a few. Xiangling takes a bit more to get going compared to Bennett given most of her value hinges on her own personal damage output, but from an actual cost perspective, C4 is the farthest you need to go on her, and given how unusually often she happens to pop up on banners, there's no way you won't get her to C4 just by playing the game. And even if Mavuika comes out and power creeps her, Xiangling's status as a 4-star will ensure that she's a staple presence in every player's accounts and teams. An extremely easy character to use with some of the best party equity of any 4-star. Oh, I should mention the secret condition to doing infinite DPS on her is to be able to recite her copy pasta by memory, so get to it. Second to last character will be Shinobu. In my personal opinion, Shinobu has superseded Sucrose in terms of who would be the top 5 4-stars in the game. Interesting thing about her is that Shinobu can only be used efficiently in Dendro teams, Hyper Bloom or Quicken, whichever you prefer. However, she happens to be the only Electro unit who can heal the active character while consistently applying Electro, or rather the only one who doesn't suck at least. Consolidating those things together into one character enable you to use her in just about any Dendro-based team you can think of, and she's pretty easy to play too. Dendro's main draw is that it deals a ton of base damage, naturally making it a good option for free-to-play players. Shinobu happens to check off many boxes for Dendro, making her similarly a one-stop shop for Electro and Dendro teams the same way Nahida is a one-stop shop for Dendro and Dendro teams. Itemizing Shinobu is also fairly simple. You really only need Elemental Mastery, as most of the time you don't even end up using her first. Until we get another Electro support who can heal the party while applying consistent Electro off-field, everyone should look to work on their Shinobu if they plan to go Dendro, free-to-play players especially. Final character will be Fischl. If Shinobu is good for general usage, Fischl is good for offensive usage. As another member of the Power 5, Fischl's extreme application and solid personal damage essentially make her the Electro rendition of Xiangling. If you're in need of anything Electro, whether Taser, Overload, Quicken, Superconduct, what have you, look no further than her. I would say the only area where she might be a bit inconsistent is Hyper Bloom, but even then you could still make use of her in a pinch when paired with an Animo unit who can swirl. Fischl's ability to have almost permanent uptime on her skill view extended with her burst combined with having no internal cooldown on her A4 passive gives her by far the best Electro application in the game, subsequently making her a go-to option for anything that necessitates a lot of application. Therefore, she's best in slot in plenty of teams, not to mention, Electro units often work in the company of other Electro units. You can find her driving Electro by herself, or you might find her next to Shinobu, Clorant, Sino, Koting, Yai, Miko, what have you, just to spam Electro to Kingdom Come. Though building her can often get pretty multi, you'll be happy to know there are many ways to build her. You can do either purely for her own damage, or an elemental mastery focused build, or you can do both. You can also equip like 5 different artifact sets on it too, giving her plenty of options. Being a 4-star, you'll also have tons of opportunities to get her constellations without breaking the bank, so just like her fellow 4-stars on this list, her accessibility lends credence to her high market value. For most long-time players, I don't think any of these picks would be surprising, but I wanted to make this video just to give free-to-play players or new players a direction on who they should focus on for the foreseeable future. That's not to say you shouldn't go for other units that I haven't mentioned. Depending on what you already have or the type of characters you enjoy, certain units might be more essential than these ones, especially the 5-stars. Kokomi, Baitu, Verina, Yalan, I'll hate them, Raiden Shogun, Xianyun, and so on can all make an argument to be picked. But I'm trying to approach this in a general sense. Again, I love Yalan to death, but objectively you can get by with just Xingqiu. On the other hand, the majority of the characters on this list, if not all of them, are practically irreplaceable. Hope this was insightful to those who needed it and entertaining to those who wanted it. If you have any questions, you can feel free to ask them in the comments down below. Apart from that though, if you enjoyed, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at VarsFam, join my Discord server, and check out my other top 5, top 10 videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.